Chapter 1. The Corridor of Ash. The corridor stretched before them like the throat of some ancient beast, swallowing light, swallowing sound. Every step was a betrayal of their bodies, each movement a rebellion against the pain that gnawed at their bones. The blast from the core had left them hollowed, stripped of strength, but Mara's vow had been iron, and iron demanded obedience. So they moved. Kalen's boots dragged against the fractured plating, the sound sharp in the silence. His breath was ragged, each inhale a knife, each exhale a surrender he refused to give. His left arm hung useless, the shoulder scorched and torn from the eruption. He kept his right hand clenched around the grip of his rifle. Though the weapon was little more than a talisman now, its charge cells drained, its barrel cracked. Still he carried it. To drop it would be to admit defeat, and defeat was a language Kalen had never spoken. Mara led, her silhouette a jagged shadow against the corridor's endless black. Her gait was uneven, her ribs bound in makeshift bandages that bled through with every step. Yet her head was high, her eyes forward, as if the darkness itself were her enemy and she would not bow to it. She whispered commands under her breath, not for them but for herself, a litany of survival. Left foot, right foot, don't stop. Don't stop, her voice was hoarse, but it carried the weight of command, the tone that had rallied them through fire and ruin. Rourke stumbled behind, his massive frame reduced to a shuffling wreck. The blast had carved deep into him, shrapnel embedded in his thigh, blood soaking through the torn fabric of his combat suit. He leaned heavily on the wall, each step a grunt of defiance. His eyes flicked constantly to the shadows, the soldier's instinct refusing to die even as his body begged for rest. He muttered curses under his breath, not at the pain but at the silence. Silence was worse than pain. Silence meant the enemy was waiting. The corridor itself was a graveyard. The walls were scorched, the plating warped by the core's eruption. Ash drifted in the air, fine as dust, clinging to their skin, their wounds, their lungs. The smell was acrid, metallic, the scent of burned circuitry and charred flesh. The floor was littered with fragments, shattered armor, melted steel, bones turned to brittle black. The swarm had been annihilated, yes, but annihilation left ghosts, and the ghosts lingered here. Mara halted suddenly, raising her hand. Kalen froze, his rifle instinctively rising though his vision blurred. Rourke pressed his back against the wall, his breath shallow. They listened. The silence pressed in heavy, suffocating, then faint, distant, a sound. A scrape, metal against metal, something moving in the dark. Contact, Mara hissed, her voice low but sharp. Stay sharp. Kalen's heart hammered, the adrenaline cutting through the haze of exhaustion. He tightened his grip on the rifle, though he knew it would fail him if the enemy came. He scanned the corridor, eyes straining against the black. Shadows shifted, but shadows always shifted. He swallowed hard, forcing his mind to focus. Fear was a weapon, and he would not let it be used against him. Rourke growled, the sound guttural. We're too broken for a fight. Mara turned her head, her eyes burning through the dark. Then we fight smarter. We don't have the strength for brute force. We use the corridor, we use the silence, we use everything. Her words were steel, hammered into them. Kalen nodded, though his body screamed. Rourke clenched his jaw, forcing himself upright. They moved forward again, slower now, every sense sharpened, every nerve raw. The scrape came again, closer this time. A dragging sound, deliberate, patient. Kalen's breath caught. He raised the rifle, the cracked barrel trembling. Mara lifted her hand, signaling silence. They pressed against the wall, their bodies shadows among shadows. The corridor seemed to breathe, the darkness alive. Then it appeared, a figure half seen, half born of nightmare. Its form was twisted, metallic limbs dragging against the floor, sparks flickering from its joints. The remnants of the swarm, mutated by the blast, crawling forward with relentless hunger. Its eyes glowed faintly, a sickly green, scanning the corridor with mechanical precision. Kalen's finger hovered over the trigger. He knew the rifle would fail, but instinct demanded action. Mara's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Her voice was a whisper, sharp as a blade. Not yet, wait. The creature dragged itself closer, its movements jerky, broken, but purposeful. It sniffed the air, sensors twitching, searching. Rourke's breath was a thunder in the silence, but he forced it down, his chest heaving with restraint. The creature paused, its head tilting, the green glow sweeping across the corridor. Then slowly it moved past them, its limbs scraping, its body vanishing into the dark. Only when the sound faded did Mara release Kalen's wrist. Her eyes met his, fierce, unyielding. We conserve every shot, every move. We're not fighting battles anymore. We're surviving wars. Kalen swallowed, his throat dry. He nodded, though the weight of her words pressed heavy. Rourke exhaled, a sound of relief mixed with frustration. Surviving wars, he muttered. Feels like dying slow. Mara turned, her silhouette sharp against the black. Better slow than finished. Humanity doesn't get to die here, not in this corridor, not in the dark. Her voice carried, echoing against the scorched walls. It was not hope, not comfort, it was command, and command was enough. They moved again, deeper into the corridor, deeper into the unknown. Their bodies were broken, their weapons useless, their strength gone, but there will remain and what was the last weapon humanity had. The corridor swallowed them, the silence pressing in, the shadows shifting. Behind them lay the ruins of the core, the Pyrrhic victory that had cost them everything. Ahead lay the void, uncharted, merciless. They were three soldiers, three remnants of a dying race walking into the abyss, and the abyss waited. Chapter 2, the breach. The corridor narrowed until the walls seemed to press against their shoulders, the scorched alloy sweating condensation that dripped in slow rivulets. Each droplet echoed like a hammer striking the silence, magnified by the emptiness of the void beyond. Mara led, her rifle angled low, finger brushing the trigger guard but never committing. She moved like a shadow, every step calculated, every breath measured. Behind her, Kalen's boots scuffed against the deck, the sound betraying his exhaustion. Rourke brought up the rear, his bulk a looming presence, his jaw clenched tight as if grinding down the fear that threatened to spill from his chest. The air was heavy, metallic, tinged with the acrid stench of burned circuitry. Somewhere deep in the ship's carcass, power still bled through severed conduits, sputtering arcs of light that flared and died like dying stars. The walls bore scars of battle, plasma burns, claw marks gouged deep into steel, streaks of blood dried into black crust. Every mark was a testament to humanity's retreat, every scar a reminder of what hunted them. Mara halted suddenly, raising a clenched fist. Kalen froze mid-step, his breath catching. Rourke's hand tightened around the grip of his sidearm, though the weapon's charge was nearly spent. Ahead, the corridor opened into a chamber, its bulkhead doors torn apart as if by some monstrous force. The edges curled inward, melted and twisted, the steel warped into grotesque shapes. Beyond the breach, faint green light pulsed, rhythmic, alive. Kalen swallowed hard, his throat rasping. Movement, his voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of dread. Mara's eyes narrowed, scanning the chamber. Not movement, a pulse, energy. She shifted her stance, rifle rising. Stay sharp, they advanced, each step deliberate, boots crunching over debris, shattered helmets, fragments of armor, the skeletal remains of comrades who had fallen in the first wave. Kalen's gaze lingered on a broken visor, the glass cracked, a smear of blood across its surface. He forced himself to look away, to keep moving, though the image burned into his mind. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were lined with conduits that pulsed faintly, veins feeding into a central structure that loomed like a heart. It was alien, unmistakably not of human design. Jagged spires rose from its core, twisting upward, glowing faintly with that sickly green light. The structure hummed, a low vibration that resonated in their bones, a sound that was less heard than felt. Rourke's voice was a growl. What in hell's name is that? Mara's jaw tightened. A nest, or worse. Kalen's stomach churned. He could feel it, something alive within the structure, something vast, something watching. His fingers trembled against his weapon and he forced them still, biting down on the fear that threatened to consume him. He remembered Mara's words, "We conserve," every shot, every move. He repeated them in his mind like a mantra, clinging to them as if they were armor. The hum deepened, the green light flaring brighter. Shadows shifted across the chamber, stretching, twisting. Then from the spire's movement, limbs unfurling, slick and glistening, claws scraping against steel. The creature emerged, its body a grotesque fusion of flesh and machine, its eyes burning with emerald fire. It was massive, its form hunched, its movements deliberate, predatory. Mara's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. "Hold fire, wait for my mark." Kalen's breath came fast, his heart pounding against his ribs. He wanted to shoot, to unleash everything he had, but he held, trusting Mara's command. Rourke's teeth ground together, his finger hovering over the trigger, sweat dripping down his temple. The creature moved, its head tilting, the glow of its eyes sweeping across the chamber. It sniffed the air, a guttural sound rumbling from its chest. Its claws scraped against the deck, sparks flying. It was searching, hunting. The soldiers froze, their bodies statues, their breaths shallow. Mara's mind raced. She calculated angles, distances, the odds of survival. They had 3 rifles, 2 half-spent mags, 1 sidearm with a dying charge. Against this thing it was nothing, but retreat was death. Hesitation was death. She had to choose. The creature's gaze swept closer, the green light washing over them. Kalen's muscles screamed, his body begging to move, to flee, but he forced himself still. Rourke's jaw trembled, his knuckles white against his weapon. Mara's eyes locked on the creature, her finger tightening on the trigger. Now, her voice was thunder. 3 rifles roared, the chamber erupting in fire and light. Plasma bolts streaked across the air, slamming into the creature's chest. It staggered, shrieking, the sound piercing, inhuman. Its limbs lashed out, claws tearing through steel, sparks raining down. The soldiers moved, shifting positions, firing in bursts, conserving, calculating. Kalen ducked behind a shattered console, his rifle braced, firing controlled shots. His breath was ragged, his vision blurred, but he held steady. Rourke advanced, his bulk a wall of defiance, his sidearm spitting arcs of energy that scorched the creature's flesh. Mara moved like a phantom, her rifle precise, every shot a strike against the beast's core. The creature lunged, its claws sweeping, tearing through the console Kalen hid behind. He rolled, barely escaping, the air filled with the stench of burning metal. His heart hammered, his mind screaming, but he rose, firing again, his shots striking the creature's limbs. Rourke roared, charging forward, his weapon blazing. He slammed into the creature, his shoulder driving against its chest, forcing it back. The impact reverberated through the chamber, the beast shrieking, thrashing. Mara seized the moment, her rifle aimed true, her shot piercing the creature's eye. The emerald glow shattered, the beast convulsing, collapsing in a storm of sparks and blood. Silence fell heavy, suffocating. The creature lay broken, its body twitching, its glow fading. The chamber hummed still, the spires pulsing faintly, but the beast was dead. Kalen collapsed against the wall, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. His hands trembled, his rifle slipping from his grip. Rourke stood over the corpse, his breath ragged, his body shaking with exhaustion. Mara lowered her rifle, her eyes cold, her face carved from stone. She spoke, her voice low, commanding. This was one, there will be more, we move, we don't stop, not here. Kalen's voice cracked. How many more? Mara's gaze swept the chamber, the spires, the shadows. Enough to finish us, unless we finish them first. Rourke spat, his voice a growl. Then we bleed them, every last one. Mara turned, her silhouette sharp against the fading glow. Humanity doesn't die in the dark. Not while we stand, her words echoed, heavy, unyielding. They moved again, deeper into the chamber, deeper into the nest. Their bodies broken, their weapons failing, their strength gone, but their will remained. And what was the last weapon humanity had? The void waited, merciless, uncharted, and they walked into it, shadows against the abyss, soldiers against extinction. Chapter 3, The Hollow March. The chamber's silence was deceptive. A fragile veil stretched over the raw nerves of 3 soldiers who had already seen too much. The corpse of the beast lay sprawled across the obsidian floor, its emerald eye shattered into 1,000 shards that glimmered faintly like dying stars. The spires around them pulsed with a rhythm that was not mechanical, not natural. It was alive, a heartbeat echoing through the void. Mara moved first. Her boots scraped against the stone, the sound sharp in the suffocating quiet. She kept her rifle raised, barrel sweeping across the shadows, every muscle taut. Her eyes were steel, unblinking, as though she could will the darkness into revealing its secrets. Form up, she ordered, her voice low but carrying the weight of command. We move deeper, stay tight. Kalen forced himself upright, his body trembling with exhaustion. His hands shook as he retrieved his rifle, fingers slick with sweat. He swallowed hard, the taste of copper thick in his mouth. His mind screamed at him to stop, to rest, to breathe, but Mara's words were law. He fell into step, his boots dragging slightly, his breath ragged. Rourke lingered a moment longer over the beast's corpse. He crouched, his gauntleted hand pressing against the cooling flesh, feeling the tremors of its dying spasms fade into nothing. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding. One down, he muttered, voice gravel. 1,000 waiting. He rose, towering, his silhouette broad and scarred against the faint glow. They advanced. The chamber narrowed into a corridor, walls lined with jagged spires that pulsed faintly, veins of light running through them like blood through arteries. The air was thick, metallic, humming with static that prickled against their skin. Every step echoed too loudly, reverberating down the passage like a drumbeat announcing their presence. Kalen's mind raced. He thought of the colony ships, of the faces of civilians crammed into steel coffins drifting through the void. He thought of his sister, her laughter, her promise that she would wait for him. He thought of the beast's eye shattering, the spray of blood, the silence that followed. His chest tightened, panic clawing at him. He forced it down, burying it beneath the rhythm of his boots. Mara's voice cut through the haze, eyes sharp, weapons ready. They'll come at us harder now. Rourke grunted. Let them, I'll carve them apart. Mara shot him a glance, sharp as a blade. Bravado doesn't keep you alive, discipline does. The corridor twisted, descending into a hollow expanse. The floor dropped into a vast pit, a chasm stretching into darkness. Bridges of black stone crisscrossed the void, narrow and treacherous, suspended by spires that pulsed with that same sickly rhythm. The abyss below was alive with movement, shadows shifting, shapes writhing, whispers rising like smoke. Kalen froze at the edge, staring down into the pit, his breath caught. Gods. Mara stepped forward, scanning the bridges. We cross, one at a time, keep your spacing tight, no mistakes. Rourke spat into the abyss. If we fall, we don't get back up. Then don't fall, Mara snapped. She moved first, her boots steady on the narrow bridge, rifle raised, eyes locked forward. Every step was deliberate, precise, her body balanced like a predator stalking prey. The abyss below seemed to reach for her, shadows stretching upward, but she did not falter. Kalen followed, his legs trembling, his breath shallow. The bridge felt too narrow, the void too vast. He imagined hands clawing at his ankles, pulling him down into the writhing dark. He forced his eyes forward, locked on Mara's back, her silhouette a lifeline. Rourke brought up the rear, his bulk making the bridge groan beneath his weight. He moved with grim determination, his rifle sweeping the shadows below, daring them to rise. Halfway across, the abyss stirred. A sound rose from the pit, low, guttural, vibrating through the stone. The shadows shifted, coalescing into forms. Eyes ignited in the dark, dozens, hundreds, glowing emerald like the beast they had slain. The pit was alive, a nest, a swarm. Kalen's breath hitched. "Mara, keep moving," she commanded, voice iron. "Don't stop." The swarm surged upward, shapes clawing at the bridge, shrieking, their voices a chorus of hunger. The soldiers opened fire, rifles blazing, muzzle flashes cutting through the dark. Sparks flew, bodies fell, but more rose, climbing, clawing, shrieking. Rook roared, his rifle spitting fire, his voice a battle cry. "Come on, you bastards, come on." Kalen's shots were frantic, wild, his hands shaking, his aim faltering. He felt the bridge tremble beneath him, claws scraping stone, shadows reaching. Panic surged, threatening to consume him. Mara's voice cut through the chaos. "Kalen, focus, breathe, aim true." Her words anchored him. He steadied his rifle, exhaled, fired. A creature's eye shattered, its body convulsing, falling into the abyss. He fired again and again, each shot cleaner, sharper, his panic burning into resolve. The swarm pressed harder, bodies piling against the bridge, claws tearing at stone. The soldiers advanced step by step, firing, reloading, firing again. The bridge shook, cracks splintering beneath their boots. Mara's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to bring us down. Move faster." They pushed forward, rifles blazing, shadows falling. The bridge groaned, fissures spreading, chunks of stone collapsing into the abyss. The swarm shrieked, clawing, climbing, relentless. Rook's voice thundered. "We won't make it at this pace." Mara's jaw clenched. "Then we run." She broke into a sprint, boots pounding against the cracking stone, rifle firing in bursts. Kalen followed, his breath ragged, his legs burning, fear driving him faster. Rook thundered behind them, his bulk shaking the bridge, his rifle roaring. The swarm surged, the bridge crumbled, the abyss screamed. They reached the far side as the bridge collapsed behind them, stone shattering, bodies falling into the pit. The swarm shrieked, their voices echoing, but the soldiers stood firm, rifles raised, breath heaving. Mara turned, her face carved from stone, her eyes cold fire. "This is their nest, their hive." We burn it all." Kalen's voice trembled. "How? There are too many." Rook cut him off, his voice a growl. "We don't count them, we kill them. Until there's nothing left." Mara's gaze swept the abyss, the swarm, the pulsing spires. Her voice was low, commanding, unyielding. "Humanity doesn't die here, not in this pit, not in this dark. We stand, we fight, we burn them to ash." Her words echoed across the hollow, carried by the abyss itself. The swarm shrieked in answer, their voices a storm. The soldiers raised their rifles, their silhouettes sharp against the void, and the hollow march began. Chapter 4. The hollow march. The cavern breathed like a living thing. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of bioluminescent ichor running through the stone as if the abyss itself had a heartbeat. The air was thick, damp, and stank of rot and ozone. Every breath tasted of decay. The ground beneath their boots was slick with residue, a film of alien secretion that clung to soles and made each step feel uncertain, treacherous. Mara led the way, her rifle raised, eyes scanning the shifting shadows. Her movements were precise, deliberate, every muscle taut with discipline. She had long since learned that hesitation meant death. Behind her, Kalen stumbled, his breath ragged, his nerves fraying with every shriek that echoed from the depths. His hands trembled on the rifle grip, sweat dripping into his eyes, but he forced himself onward, driven by Mara's unyielding presence. Rook brought up the rear, a hulking silhouette of steel and flesh, his heavy rifle cradled like a predator's jaw. His boots struck the ground with the weight of inevitability, each step a declaration of defiance against the swarm that hunted them. His jaw was clenched, his teeth grinding, his mind locked in the rhythm of war. The swarm was everywhere. Their shrieks reverberated through the hollow, bouncing off walls, multiplying into a chorus of hunger. Shadows darted along the cavern walls, claws scraping stone, bodies slithering in the dark. The soldiers could not see them clearly, but they felt their presence, felt the weight of countless eyes watching, waiting, hungering. Mara raised a fist, halting the squad. She crouched low, her gaze fixed on the cavern ahead. A spire rose from the abyss floor, jagged and grotesque, its surface alive with movement. The creatures clung to it, crawling, writhing, their bodies merging into a living tapestry of flesh and claw. At its peak, a pulsating mass glowed faintly, casting sickly light across the hollow. The hive heart. Kalen swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "Gods, it's alive." Rook's growl cut through the silence. "It's not a god. It's a wound," and with a knife. Mara's eyes narrowed. She studied the spire, the swarm, the terrain. Her mind calculated distances, angles, probabilities. Every detail mattered, every mistake would cost blood. She spoke, her voice low but commanding, each word carved from iron. "We set charges at the base, shape the blast to bring it down. Rook, you cover the perimeter. Kalen, you're with me. We move fast, we move silent. If they swarm, we hold until the charges are primed. No retreat, no hesitation." Kalen's throat tightened. His hands shook, but he nodded. "Understood." Rook chambered around, the sound echoing like a war drum. "Let them come." They moved. Mara led Kalen down the slope toward the spire, their boots sinking into the slick ground. The air grew heavier, the stench stronger, the shrieks louder. Every step was a descent into madness. The swarm shifted above them, claws scraping, bodies writhing, but they did not yet descend. They watched, they waited. Mara knelt at the base of the spire, her hands working quickly, efficiently. She pulled charges from her pack, magnetic clamps snapping against the stone. Her fingers moved with precision, her mind focused, her heartbeat steady. Kalen crouched beside her, fumbling with wires, his breath shallow, his eyes darting to the shadows. Focus, Mara hissed. The blast has to be perfect, no mistakes. Kalen forced his trembling hands to obey, connecting wires, securing clamps. Sweat dripped from his brow, his vision blurred, but he pushed through. He thought of the bridge collapsing, of the abyss screaming, of Mara's voice cutting through the dark. Humanity doesn't die here. He clung to those words like a lifeline. Above them the swarm stirred. A ripple passed through the mass, claws clicking, bodies shifting. The hive heart pulsed faster, its glow intensifying. The creatures shrieked, a sound that pierced bone, that clawed at sanity. Rourke's rifle roared. The cavern lit with muzzle flash, shadows tearing apart as rounds ripped into flesh. The swarm shrieked in fury, bodies tumbling from the spire, claws scraping stone as they descended. Untacked, Rourke bellowed, his voice thunder in the hollow. They're coming. Mara's hands moved faster, her breath sharp, her eyes locked on the detonator. Kalen, hold steady. Kalen's rifle snapped up, his finger squeezing the trigger. Bursts of fire spat into the dark, rounds tearing into bodies that lunged from the walls. His arms shook, his aim faltered, but he fired again and again, driven by desperation. The swarm hit like a storm, bodies crashed against stone, claws slashing, jaws snapping. Rourke stood firm, his rifle roaring, his bulk a wall of defiance. He fired in controlled bursts, each shot precise, each kill deliberate. Blood sprayed, ichor splattered, the cavern shook with violence. Mara snapped the final wire into place, her voice ablade. Charges primed, Kalen's breath caught, relief surged, but it was fleeting. The swarm was upon them, claws reaching, jaws snapping. He fired point-blank, rounds tearing through flesh, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but he held the line. Rourke's roar shook the cavern. Detonate, Mara slammed her thumb on the trigger. The charges ignited, a thunderclap of fire and stone. The spire shuddered, cracks racing up its length, the hive heart pulsing violently. The swarm shrieked, their voices a storm of agony. The spire collapsed. Stone shattered, bodies crushed, the hive heart ruptured in a burst of light and ichor. The cavern shook, the abyss screamed, the swarm writhed in chaos. Mara rose, her eyes blazing, her voice cutting through the storm. Push forward, burn them out. Kalen staggered to his feet, his rifle spitting fire, his fear drowned in fury. Rourke surged ahead, his bulk a battering ram, his rifle roaring like thunder. They advanced through the chaos, through the shrieks, through the storm of claws and blood. The hollow march had begun. Every step was war, every breath was defiance. Humanity's last stand carved itself into the abyss, into the swarm, into the void itself. And Mara's voice carried above it all, unyielding, unbroken. We fight, we burn, we endure. Chapter 5. The hollow march. The cavern's silence after the detonation was not silence at all. It was a suffocating roar of settling stone, of distant shrieks echoing through tunnels unseen, of the hive's death throes reverberating like a heartbeat gone mad. Dust hung thick, a choking veil that turned the air into ash. The squad pressed forward, boots crunching over shattered carapaces and splintered rock, every step a declaration of defiance against the abyss. Kalen's lungs burned. His visor was smeared with ichor, his rifle's barrel glowing faintly from the relentless fire he had poured into the swarm. He blinked hard, forcing his vision to clear, forcing his body to obey. The cavern stretched ahead, jagged walls slick with alien residue, the ground littered with twitching limbs. He could feel the swarm's presence even in their absence, like a pressure in the skull, a whisper at the edge of thought. Rourke's massive frame loomed ahead, his armor dented, scarred, streaked with blood both human and not. He moved like a war machine, each step deliberate, each motion calculated to crush resistance. His voice was gravel, low and commanding. Keep formation, don't break. They'll regroup. Mara was already at the front, her silhouette sharp against the haze, her rifle raised, her movements precise. She was the blade that cut through hesitation, her eyes burning with a fire that refused to dim. She glanced back, her voice slicing through the dust. Forward, no retreat. The hive heart is ruptured, but the tunnels are alive. They'll come again. Kalen swallowed hard, his throat raw. How many? His voice cracked, betraying the exhaustion clawing at him. Mara's reply was cold steel. Enough to drown us if we falter. The squad pressed deeper into the cavern. The walls narrowed, forcing them into a choke point, the ceiling dripping with viscous strands that pulsed faintly, alive with residual energy. The air stank of burnt flesh and alien ichor, a stench that clung to the skin, seeped into the lungs. Kalen's boots slipped on the slick ground, and he steadied himself against the wall, his fingers brushing against a surface that writhed faintly beneath his touch. He recoiled, bile rising in his throat. Organic, Mara muttered, her voice tight. The hive grows itself into the stone. Every inch of this place is alive. Rourke spat, the sound harsh in the silence. Then we kill it. Burn it out, they advanced, rifles raised, eyes scanning the shadows. The cavern seemed endless, each turn revealing more grotesque architecture, pillars of fused bone and stone, walls veined with pulsing light, floors littered with husks that twitched as though refusing to die. The oppressive weight of the void pressed down on them, the sense that they were trespassers in a place that hated them, a place that wanted them consumed. Kalen's mind raced, every shadow a threat, every sound a warning. He thought of the surface, of the cities that had already fallen, of the screams that had echoed through comm channels before static claimed them. He thought of humanity's dwindling fleets, of the desperate broadcasts that spoke of last stands and final defenses. And he thought of Mara, her voice, her fire, her refusal to yield. She was the anchor in the storm, the reason his legs kept moving when his body screamed to collapse. The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a chamber vast and terrible. The ceiling arched high, lost in shadow, the walls lined with grotesque growths that pulsed faintly, casting sickly light across the floor. In the center, a pit yawned, its edges slick with ichor, its depths alive with movement. The swarm was gathering, shapes shifting, claws scraping, eyes gleaming in the dark. Mara raised her hand, halting the squad. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried like a command. They're waiting, testing us. Rourke's growl was thunder. Then we show them what waits in the dark. Kalen's heart pounded, his rifle trembling in his grip. He could see them now, hundreds, maybe more, their bodies slick with ichor, their jaws snapping, their claws digging into the stone. The swarm was endless, a tide of flesh and fury, a nightmare given form. He felt the weight of inevitability pressing down, the knowledge that no matter how many they killed, more would come. But Mara's voice cut through the despair, sharp and unyielding. We hold, we burn, we endure. The swarm surged. The chamber erupted in chaos. Rifles roared, muzzle flashes strobing the dark, rounds tearing through flesh, ichor spraying in arcs that painted the walls. Kalen fired until his rifle screamed, his shoulder bruised from recoil, his ears ringing from the thunder of gunfire. Rourke was a wall of destruction, his rifle spitting fire, his fists crushing skulls when the swarm pressed too close. Mara moved like a phantom, her shots precise, her blade flashing when the swarm breached the line. The swarm pressed harder, bodies piling, claws raking, jaws snapping. Kalen felt the line falter, felt the weight of numbers pressing them back. His vision blurred, his breath ragged, his body screaming for relief. He stumbled, a claw grazing his armor, sparks flying. He fell to one knee, his rifle slipping from his grasp. Mara, his voice was a plea, raw and desperate. She was there in an instant, her blade flashing, severing the claw that reached for him. Her hand gripped his shoulder, her voice a command that brooked no refusal. Stand, Kalen, stand and fight. He rose, his body trembling, his rifle reclaimed. He fired, each shot a scream of defiance, each breath a refusal to yield. The swarm shrieked, their voices a storm, their bodies pressing, but the squad held, their line unbroken, their fury unrelenting. Rourke's roar shook the chamber. Grenades, now. Mara's hand moved fast, pulling the pin, hurling the grenade into the pit. Kalen followed, his motion clumsy but desperate. The grenades detonated, fire and shrapnel tearing through the swarm, bodies shredded, ichor boiling. The pit erupted in chaos, the swarm shrieking, their formation broken. Push, Mara's voice was fire. Push them back. They surged forward, rifles blazing, blades flashing, fury unleashed. The swarm faltered, their tide broken, their bodies falling in heaps. The chamber filled with smoke, with fire, with the stench of burning flesh. Kalen's lungs burned, his vision blurred, but he pressed forward, his body driven by rage, by defiance, by Mara's voice. The swarm broke, silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The chamber was a graveyard, the floor littered with bodies, the walls slick with ichor. The pit was a charnel house, its depths filled with shredded flesh. The squad stood, their bodies battered, their armor scarred, their breaths ragged, but they stood. Mara lowered her rifle, her eyes blazing, her voice cutting through the silence. This is what it means to endure, this is humanity's stand. Kalen's chest heaved, his body trembling, his mind reeling. He looked at her, at Rourke, at the chamber of death around them. And he felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins. Rourke's voice was gravel, low and steady. We move, the hive isn't dead yet. Mara nodded, her eyes unyielding. Then we kill it, every last breath. The hollow march continued. Chapter 6, The Hollow March. The chamber's silence was not peace. It was the silence of corpses, of smoke curling from ruptured flesh, of steel cooling after violence. The squad moved like shadows across the pit, boots sinking into ichor-slick stone, rifles raised though no enemy stirred. Every breath was a rasp, every heartbeat a drum against the ribs. Kalen's legs trembled beneath him, but he forced them forward. His armor was cracked at the shoulder, blackened where fire had kissed it, but he carried his rifle as if it were an extension of his rage. His eyes darted across the walls, searching for movement, for the twitch of a claw, the glimmer of alien eyes. Nothing, only the stench of death. Rourke's voice cut through the haze. Form up, tight, no gaps. The squad obeyed, instinct overriding exhaustion. They drew together, rifles angled outward, blades sheathed but ready. Mara moved to the front, her silhouette sharp against the glow of burning ichor. Her eyes were fire, her jaw set like iron. Kalen watched her, the way she carried herself, unyielding, unbroken. He wanted to believe her strength was endless, that she could drag them all through hell and back. But he saw the tremor in her hand as she reloaded, the faint hitch in her breath. She was human like him, and yet she refused to yield. The pit sloped upward into a tunnel, its walls jagged, its ceiling low. The air was thick, humid, alive with the stink of rot. Shadows clung to the stone, shifting as if they breathed. Eyes open, Mara commanded. The swarm broke, but the hive still breathes. We cut its heart out. They advanced. Every step was a battle. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them into a column. Kalen took the rear, his rifle sweeping the darkness behind them. His ears rang with phantom shrieks, echoes of the swarm's death cries. He imagined claws scraping stone, bodies slithering through the dark. His finger tightened on the trigger, but nothing came. Rourke's bulk filled the center, his heavy armor scarred, his movements deliberate. He carried the squad's heavy repeater, its barrel scorched from overuse. His eyes were cold, calculating, scanning every crevice. Movement, he growled suddenly, halting the squad. Kalen froze, breath caught in his throat. He saw it too, a ripple in the shadows ahead, a shimmer against the wall. Mara raised her fist, signaling silence. The tunnel erupted, figures burst from the stone itself, their bodies slick and angular, claws glinting in the dim light. They moved with impossible speed, shrieking as they lunged. Contact, Mara's voice was thunder. The squad unleashed fury. Rifles spat fire, blades flashed. Kalen's rifle bucked against his shoulder, rounds tearing into alien flesh. Ichor sprayed, sizzling against the stone. One creature leapt at him, claws extended. He sidestepped, driving his blade into its throat, twisting until it collapsed in a heap. The tunnel became chaos. The swarm was smaller, faster, their bodies darting through the shadows. Mara fought like a storm, her rifle blazing, her blade cutting arcs of death. Rourke's repeater roared, shredding bodies into pulp, the recoil shaking his massive frame. Kalen's lungs burned, his vision blurred, but he fought. He fought because Mara's voice demanded it, because Rourke's steadiness anchored him, because humanity's last stand was carved into his veins. Hold the line, Mara shouted, her voice cutting through the shrieks. Push them back, they pushed. The tunnel filled with smoke, with fire, with the stench of burning ichor. Bodies piled at their feet, slick and twitching. The swarm faltered, their shrieks turning to wails, and then silence. Kalen's chest heaved, his blade dripping, his rifle empty. He reloaded with trembling hands, eyes scanning the corpses. His heart thundered, his mind screaming. Rourke's voice was gravel. They're probing, testing us. The hive knows we're here. Mara wiped ichor from her visor, her eyes blazing. Then let it know we're coming. They moved again, deeper into the tunnel. The walls pulsed faintly as if alive, veins of ichor glowing beneath the stone. The air grew hotter, thicker, suffocating. Kalen felt it pressing against his lungs, against his mind. He thought of Earth, of the cities burning, of the skies filled with fire. He thought of the millions already dead, of the billions waiting for salvation that might never come. He thought of Mara's voice, of Rourke's steadiness, of the squad's defiance. And he knew this was humanity's last stand. The tunnel widened into a chamber. The walls glistened, slick with ichor, pulsing like flesh. At its center stood a structure, a spire of bone and stone, twisted, alive. It throbbed with light, with energy, with malice. Mara's voice was steel. The hive heart. Kalen felt his blood run cold. The spire radiated power, its pulse echoing in his chest. He knew instinctively this was the source, the core, the mind of the swarm. Destroy it and they cripple the hive. Fail and humanity dies. Rourke raised his repeater, his voice low. We bring it down. The squad formed a line, rifles raised, blades ready. Mara stepped forward, her eyes locked on the spire. This is it, she said, her voice cutting through the chamber. No retreat, no surrender. Humanity stands here. Kalen's hands tightened on his rifle. His heart thundered, his lungs burned, his mind screamed. But he stood. He stood because Mara stood, because Rourke stood, because humanity demanded it. The chamber trembled, the spire pulsed, its light flaring. The walls split, birthing creatures from the stone, their bodies slick, their claws glinting. The swarm erupted, shrieking, charging. Mara's voice was fire. Push. The squad surged forward, rifles blazing, blades flashing, fury unleashed. The chamber became chaos, became war, became humanity's last stand. Kalen fought like a man possessed, his rifle tearing through bodies, his blade carving arcs of death. He felt ichor spray across his armor, felt claws scrape against steel, felt the fire of defiance burning in his veins. Rourke's repeater roared, shredding bodies, his voice a growl. Hold the line. Mara fought like a storm, her blade flashing, her rifle blazing, her voice commanding. Push them back. The swarm faltered, their tide broken, their bodies falling in heaps. The chamber filled with smoke, with fire, with the stench of burning flesh. Kalen's lungs burned, his vision blurred, but he pressed forward. He pressed because Mara's voice demanded it, because Rourke's steadiness anchored him, because humanity's last stand burned in his veins. The swarm broke, silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The chamber was a graveyard, the floor littered with bodies, the walls slick with ichor. The spire pulsed faintly, its light dimming. Mara lowered her rifle, her eyes blazing. This is what it means to endure, this is humanity's stand. Kalen's chest heaved, his body trembling, his mind reeling. He looked at her, at Rourke, at the chamber of death around them. Felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins. Rourke's voice was gravel, low and steady. We move, the hive isn't dead yet. Mara nodded, her eyes unyielding. Then we kill it, every last breath. The hollow march continued. Chapter 7, The Hollow March. The chamber's silence was not peace, it was the suffocating pause before the next storm. Kalen's boots sank into ichor-slick stone as he moved, each step heavy, each breath ragged. The spire's dim pulse cast shadows across the walls, shadows that seemed alive, writhing, whispering promises of annihilation. His rifle hung low, barrel steaming, the weight of it dragging at his arm. He forced his grip tighter, forced his mind to stay sharp. Rourke's silhouette loomed ahead, broad shoulders hunched beneath scarred armor, repeater slung across his chest. His voice was gravel ground against steel. Eyes open, the swarm broke, but the hive breathes. Don't trust the quiet. Kalen swallowed hard, tasting blood and smoke. His gaze flicked to Mara. She moved like a blade drawn from its sheath, precise, unyielding, her armor streaked with gore, her eyes burning with command. She raised her rifle, scanning the corridor that stretched beyond the chamber. The walls narrowed into a throat of stone and steel, ribbed with alien growths that pulsed faintly like veins feeding some monstrous heart. Form up, Mara ordered, her voice cutting through the haze. We march, every step forward is a step closer to killing this hive. Kalen fell into line, his body trembling but his spirit aflame. The corridor swallowed them, its ceiling low, its air thick with the stench of rot. Their boots echoed against the stone, a hollow rhythm that matched the pounding of Kalen's heart. He felt the weight of the silence pressing in, felt the unseen eyes watching from the dark. Rourke's repeater clicked as he checked the chamber. Ammo's bleeding low. We'll need to ration fire. Kalen's voice was hoarse but steady. Then blades will speak. He tightened his grip on the hilt strapped to his thigh, the steel that had carved arcs of death through the swarm. Mara glanced back, her eyes locking with his. Blades, rifles, fists, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we don't stop. Humanity doesn't stop. Her words were iron, hammered into Kalen's chest. He nodded, forcing his legs to move, forcing his lungs to draw breath. The corridor twisted, narrowing further, the walls slick with ichor that dripped in slow rivulets. The spire's pulse grew faint behind them, replaced by a deeper rhythm, a thrum that vibrated through the stone, a heartbeat that was not human. Kalen felt it in his bones, felt it gnawing at the edges of his mind. Rourke growled, his voice low. Hive's awake, it knows we're here. Mara raised her rifle, her stance rigid. Then let it know we're coming. They pressed forward. The corridor opened into a cavern vast and jagged, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor littered with husks of the swarm. The bodies twitched, spasms of dying nerves, claws scraping faintly against stone. Kalen's stomach clenched, bile rising. He forced it down, forced his eyes to stay sharp. Cavern's walls were alive, growths pulsing, veins glowing faintly, sacks swelling with fluid. The air was thick, humid, reeking of decay. Kalen's boots sank into the muck, each step a struggle. He felt the weight of the hive pressing down, felt its hunger gnawing at his soul. Mara's voice cut through the suffocating air. Form a perimeter, watch the walls, they'll come from everywhere. Kalen moved to her flank, rifle raised, blade ready. Rourke took the rear, repeater braced against his shoulder, eyes scanning the shadows. The silence shattered, a screech tore through the cavern, high and piercing, a sound that clawed at Kalen's skull. The walls convulsed, sacks rupturing, ichor spraying. From the shadows they came, creatures twisted, bodies armored in chitin, claws glistening, eyes burning with alien fire. Contact, Mara's voice was a thunderclap. Her rifle roared, muzzle flash lighting the cavern. Kalen's body moved before thought, his rifle snapped up, rounds tearing into the swarm. He felt the recoil slam into his shoulder, felt the heat of the barrel, felt the ichor spray across his visor. His blade flashed, carving arcs of steel, severing limbs, splitting skulls. Rourke's repeater thundered, each burst shredding bodies, each shot a roar of defiance. Hold the line, his voice was fury, his stance unyielding. The swarm pressed, bodies piling, claws raking, screeches filling the air. Kalen's lungs burned, his vision blurred, but he pressed forward. He pressed because Mara's voice demanded it, because Rourke's steadiness anchored him, because humanity's last stand burned in his veins. Mara's blade flashed, her rifle blazing, her voice commanding. Push them back, push them into the walls. Kalen's blade carved, his rifle tore, his body moved like a storm. He felt the fire of defiance burning, felt the refusal to yield. He pressed, he killed, he endured. The swarm faltered. Bodies fell, ichor sprayed, the cavern filled with smoke and fire. The creatures screeched, their tide broken, their bodies falling in heaps. Silence fell again, heavy and suffocating. The cavern was a graveyard, the floor littered with corpses, the walls slick with ichor. The heartbeat of the hive throbbed faintly, deeper, darker, unbroken. Kalen's chest heaved, his body trembling, his mind reeling. He looked at Mara, at Rurk, at the cavern of death around them. And he felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins. Rurk's voice was gravel, low and steady. This isn't the heart, this is just the throat, the hive's deeper. Mara nodded, her eyes unyielding. Then we march deeper. Every step forward, every breath, until the hive is ash. Kalen swallowed hard, his throat raw. He tightened his grip on his rifle, on his blade. He forced his legs to move, forced his lungs to draw breath. He marched. The hollow march continued. The corridor beyond the cavern was darker, narrower, the walls closing in, the air thicker. The heartbeat of the hive grew louder, deeper, vibrating through the stone, through Kalen's bones. He felt it gnawing at his mind, whispering promises of death. Mara's voice was iron. We march, we endure, we kill. Kalen's voice was hoarse but steady. Humanity doesn't stop. Rurk's growl was thunder. Then neither do we, and so they marched deeper into the void, deeper into the hive, deeper into humanity's last stand. Chapter 8, into the maw, the corridor constricted around them, a throat of stone and flesh, slick with the residue of the hive's breath. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of bioluminescent ichor glowing like diseased arteries. Each step sank into the damp floor, the sound muffled, swallowed by the oppressive silence. The heartbeat of the hive was louder now, a drumbeat reverberating through Kalen's chest, threatening to synchronize with his own pulse to claim him. Kalen's grip tightened on his rifle, the metal slick with sweat. His knuckles whitened, his jaw clenched. He forced his eyes forward, past the shadows that seemed to writhe at the edges of his vision. He could feel the hive pressing against his mind, whispering in voices that weren't his, promises of release, of surrender, of peace in death. He shook his head violently, teeth grinding. No, humanity doesn't stop, humanity doesn't kneel. Mara moved ahead, her silhouette sharp against the faint glow of the walls. Her armor was scarred, her blade dripping with the remnants of the last battle. She walked with purpose, each step deliberate, her shoulders squared. Her voice cut through the suffocating air, iron and unyielding. Eyes sharp, weapons ready. The hive knows we're here. It's listening, Rurk's growl followed, low and thunderous. Let it listen, let it know we're coming for its heart. The corridor twisted, narrowing further, forcing them into single file. Kalen felt the walls brushing against his shoulders, the dampness seeping into his armor. The air grew thicker, heavy with the stench of rot and acid. His lungs burned with each breath, his throat raw. He swallowed hard, forcing down the bile that threatened to rise. They moved deeper, the heartbeat louder, faster. The walls trembled faintly, as if the hive itself was aware of their intrusion, as if it was preparing to swallow them whole. Kalen's mind raced, thoughts colliding, splintering. He thought of Earth, of the cities reduced to ash, of the faces of those who had fallen. He thought of the silence that followed, the silence that had driven them here into the void, into the maw of the hive. Mara's voice snapped him back. Kalen, focus. He nodded sharply, forcing his thoughts into line, forcing his body to obey. His rifle rose, the barrel steady, his finger brushing the trigger. He scanned the shadows, the walls, the ceiling. Every flicker of light, every ripple of ichor was a threat. The corridor opened suddenly, spilling them into a chamber vast and cavernous. The walls rose high, disappearing into darkness, the ceiling lost in shadow. Floor was uneven, slick with pools of ichor, littered with bones both human and alien. The heartbeat was deafening here, a thunderous drum that shook the chamber, that rattled Kalen's teeth. Shapes moved in the darkness, slithering, crawling. The air vibrated with the sound of claws scraping stone, of wings beating faintly. Kalen's breath caught, his muscles tensed. He raised his rifle, the scope glowing faintly, scanning the shadows. Mara stepped forward, her blade raised, her eyes burning. Form up, tight formation. We hold this ground, Rurk's voice was gravel, steady despite the storm. They'll come in waves, they'll try to break us. We don't break, Kalen swallowed hard, his throat dry. He forced his voice out, hoarse but steady. Humanity doesn't stop. The shadows erupted. Creatures poured from the walls, from the ceiling, from the pools of ichor. Their bodies twisted, armored and chitined, their eyes glowing with sickly light. They screeched, a sound that tore through the chamber, that clawed at Kalen's mind. He fired, the rifle kicking against his shoulder, the rounds tearing through flesh and bone. The creatures fell, their bodies writhing, their ichor spraying across the floor. Mara moved like a storm, her blade slicing through the tide, her movements precise, brutal. She cut down one creature, spun, drove her blade into another. Her armor was splattered with ichor, her face set in iron resolve. Rurk was a wall, his heavy weapon roaring, tearing through the swarm. His growl was thunder, his stance unyielding. He fired, reloaded, fired again, each shot a hammer blow against the tide. Kalen's breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling, his mind screaming. He fired, reloaded, fired again, his movements mechanical, driven by sheer will. The creatures pressed closer, their claws scraping against his armor, their screeches deafening. He swung his blade, the steel cutting through flesh, through bone. He felt the ichor spray across his face, burning his skin, searing his eyes. He blinked furiously, forced his vision to clear, forced his body to move. The chamber was chaos, a storm of blood and fire. The creatures pressed from all sides, their numbers endless, their fury unbroken. The ground was slick with ichor, the air thick with the stench of death. The heartbeat of the hive thundered, louder, faster, shaking the chamber, shaking Kalen's soul. Mara's voice cut through the storm, sharp and commanding. Hold the line, every breath, every step, until the hive is ash. Rourke's growl followed, steady and unyielding. We don't break. We don't fall, Kalen screamed, his voice raw, his throat tearing. Humanity doesn't stop. The tide broke against them, bodies falling in heaps, ichor spraying across the chamber. The creatures screeched, their fury unbroken, their numbers endless. But Kalen felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins, driving his body, driving his soul. The chamber shook, the walls trembling, the ceiling cracking. The heartbeat of the hive thundered, louder, faster, desperate. The creatures pressed harder, their fury rising, their screeches deafening. Mara's blade flashed, Rourke's weapon roared, Kalen's rifle fired. They stood unyielding, unbroken, defiant, and in that storm, in that chaos, Kalen felt it, the hive's fear. It was subtle, buried beneath the tide, beneath the fury. But it was there, a tremor in the heartbeat, a hesitation in the tide. The hive knew, the hive feared. Kalen's voice rose, raw and defiant. We march, we endure, we kill. Mara's eyes burned, her blade dripping with ichor, until the hive is ash. Rourke's growl was thunder, his weapon roaring. Then neither do we. And so they stood in the maw of the hive, in the storm of death, in humanity's last stand. They stood unyielding, unbroken, defiant. The chamber was a graveyard, the floor littered with corpses, the walls slick with ichor. The heartbeat of the hive throbbed faintly, deeper, darker, unbroken, but Kalen felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins, and he knew the hive would burn. Chapter 9, the maw of silence, the chamber's heartbeat faltered, a low, guttural thrum that reverberated through the cracked walls like the dying pulse of a leviathan. Dust sifted down from the fractured ceiling, mingling with the stench of ichor and scorched flesh. The air was thick, oppressive, every breath a struggle against the hive's suffocating presence. Kalen pressed his back against the jagged wall, rifle clutched tight, its barrel steaming from relentless fire. His eyes scanned the carnage, mounds of broken carapaces, twitching limbs, pools of black ichor spreading across the stone floor like oil slicks. Yet even in their ruin, the creatures seemed alive, their corpses twitching as if the hive itself refused to let them die. Mara crouched nearby, her blade dripping, her breath ragged but steady. Her eyes were sharp, burning with a fury that matched Kalen's own. She wiped ichor from her cheek with the back of her hand, smearing it like war paint. They're thinning, she muttered, voice low, dangerous, but the hive isn't done. It's holding back. Rourke slammed a fresh magazine into his weapon, the metallic click echoing like a war drum. His jaw was clenched, his face streaked with grime and blood. Holding back, no, it's waiting, testing us like a predator circling prey. He spat onto the floor, the saliva mixing with ichor. It knows we're not breaking. Kalen's gaze drifted upward to the fissures in the ceiling where faint light bled through. The hive's pulse seemed to resonate with those cracks, as though the entire structure was alive, breathing, watching. He felt it in his bones, the hive's fear, its hesitation, but fear was never simple. Fear could birth desperation, desperation could birth annihilation. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle. It pressed against them, a suffocating weight. Kalen's fingers tightened around his rifle, knuckles white. He could hear his own heartbeat, fast, erratic, echoing the hive's faltering rhythm. Then the silence broke. A screech tore through the chamber, deeper, louder, more primal than any before. The walls shuddered, cracks widening, dust raining down in choking clouds. From the far end of the chamber, shadows writhed, shifting, coalescing. The tide was coming again. Kalen stepped forward, his boots sinking into ichor. His voice was steel, cutting through the chaos. Form up, no retreat. No hesitation. Mara rose, blade gleaming in the dim light. We carved them down, every last one. Rourke's growl was thunder, and if we fall standing. The chamber erupted. The creatures surged, a tide of claws and fangs, their screeches deafening, their fury renewed. They poured from the shadows, from fissures in the walls, from cracks in the ceiling. The hive had unleashed its storm. Kalen's rifle roared, muzzle flash illuminating the chamber in bursts of fire. He moved with precision, each shot tearing through carapace, each step deliberate, controlled. His mind was a battlefield of its own, fear clawing at the edges, defiance burning at the core. Mara was a blur of steel, her blade slicing through limbs, severing heads, her movements fluid, relentless. She fought like a storm-given flesh, every strike a declaration of defiance. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but her eyes never wavered. Rourke's weapon thundered, each burst tearing through clusters of creatures, ichor spraying in arcs across the chamber. His stance was immovable, a wall of fire and fury. He bellowed curses, his voice a weapon as much as his gun. The tide pressed harder, bodies piling, claws scraping, screeches rising. The chamber shook, the hive's heartbeat pounding faster, louder, desperate. Kalen felt it, the hive's fear, buried beneath the fury. It was there, subtle, trembling. The hive knew, the hive feared, but fear made it dangerous. A tremor rippled through the floor, cracks splitting the stone. From the fissures, new forms emerged, larger, stronger, armored in jagged carapace. Their eyes glowed with a sickly light, their movements deliberate, calculated. These were not the mindless tide, these were the hive's chosen. Kalen's breath caught, his chest tightening. His voice was low, grim, new wave, heavies, brace. Mara's blade lifted, her stance shifting. Then we cut deeper, Rourke's weapon roared, but his eyes narrowed. They're not here to kill us. They're here to break us. The heavies advanced, their steps shaking the chamber, their screeches resonating with the hive's heartbeat. They moved with purpose, their claws slicing through stone, their eyes locked on the three humans who stood defiant. Kalen's rifle barked, rounds slamming into carapace, sparks flying. The creatures staggered but did not fall. Their armor was thick, their bodies resilient. Mara darted forward, blade flashing, striking at joints, at weak points. Her strikes were precise, surgical, but the creatures endured, their claws lashing out, forcing her back. Rourke unleashed a storm of fire, his weapon roaring, but the heavies pressed on, their advance unbroken. The chamber became a crucible, fire and steel clashing against carapace and claw. The air was thick with smoke, ichor spraying, bodies colliding. Every movement was survival, every breath defiance. Kalen's mind raced, tactics forming, desperation clawing. He saw the fissures, the cracks, the weak points in the chamber. He saw the hive's pulse, faltering, trembling, he knew. Target the walls, he shouted, voice raw. Bring it down, the hive bleeds through its veins. Mara's eyes burned, her blade shifting. She struck at the fissures, steel biting stone, sparks flying. Rourke's weapon roared, rounds tearing into cracks, stone splintering, dust raining. The chamber shook, the hive's heartbeat faltering, desperate. The walls trembled, fissures widening, light bleeding through. The heavies screeched, their movements faltering, hesitation rippling through their ranks. The hive's fear was rising, its desperation unmasked. Kalen pressed harder, his rifle blazing, his voice thunder. We march, we endure, we kill. Mara's blade flashed, her voice a storm. Until the hive is ash, Rourke's growl was fire, his weapon roaring. Then neither do we. The chamber erupted, stone collapsing, fissures widening, light flooding. The hive's heartbeat faltered, breaking, trembling. The creatures screeched, their tide faltering, their fury broken. Kalen felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins, and he knew the hive would burn. Chapter 10, the collapse. The chamber was no longer a chamber, it was a battlefield collapsing in on itself, a tomb of stone and shrieking flesh. Dust swirled in choking clouds, the air thick with the stench of ichor and burning propellant. Every breath was a knife, every heartbeat a drum of defiance. Kalen pressed forward, boots grinding against fractured stone, rifle braced tight against his shoulder. His visor flickered with static as the hive's pulse reverberated through the walls, a rhythm of dying fury. He could feel it, the hive was weakening, its veins rupturing, its lifeblood spilling into the cracks. Yet the creatures did not relent, they surged, claw and carapace, a tide of desperation. Hold the line, Kalen roared, voice raw, throat torn from shouting. His words were not just command, they were anchor, steel binding the squad together. Mara darted past him, her blade gleaming in the fractured light. She moved like a shadow, every strike precise, every motion a dance of survival. Her eyes burned with fury, with the fire of vengeance. She carved through a heavy steel biting into its joint, severing limb from body. The creature shrieked, collapsing, its ichor spraying across her armor. She did not flinch, Rourke's weapon thundered, each round a hammer against the fissures. He aimed not at the creatures but at the walls, tearing stone apart, widening the cracks. Dust rained down, choking, blinding, his growl cut through the chaos. Bring it down, if the hive dies, they die with it. The chamber shook, a quake that rattled teeth and bones. The fissures widened, light bleeding through like veins of fire. The creatures faltered, their movements erratic, hesitation rippling through their ranks. The hive's fear was palpable, its desperation unmasked. Kalen's mind raced, tactics forming in the chaos. He saw the weak points, the fractures that could be exploited. He knew the risk, collapse meant death, burial beneath stone and claw, but survival was no longer the goal. Victory was annihilation. Push forward, he commanded, voice thunder. Drive them into the cracks, make the hive bleed. The squad surged, a storm of steel and fire. Mara's blade flashed, severing limbs, piercing carapace. Rourke's weapon roared, tearing stone and flesh alike. Kalen's rifle blazed, rounds ripping through fissures, widening them, forcing collapse. The creatures screamed, their tide faltering, their fury broken. They clawed at the walls, desperate to hold them, desperate to preserve the hive's pulse. but the cracks widened, stone splintering, light flooding. Kalen felt it, the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He felt humanity's last stand burning in his veins. He pressed harder, every shot a declaration, every strike a promise. The chamber erupted, stone collapsed, fissures widening into chasms, light flooded, blinding, searing. The hive's heartbeat faltered, breaking, trembling. The creatures shrieked, their tide shattered, their fury undone. Mara's voice cut through the chaos, a storm of defiance, until the hive is ash. Rurk's growl was fire, his weapon roaring. Then neither do we. The chamber collapsed, stone falling, dust choking. The hive's pulse broke, silence crashing through the chaos. The creatures faltered, their movements broken, their fury extinguished. Kalen stood amidst the ruin, rifle smoking, armor scarred. He felt the fire, the defiance, the refusal to yield. He knew the hive would burn, but as the dust settled, as the silence spread, Kalen's mind turned. He saw the cracks not just in stone but in himself, in his squad. He saw the fractures of humanity, the desperation that drove them. He knew the cost. The hive was broken, but the war was not. And in the shadows of the void, humanity's last stand had only just begun. The chamber was a grave now, a tomb of stone and ichor. The squad stood amidst the ruin, weapons smoking, armor scarred. Their breaths were ragged, their bodies broken, yet their eyes burned, their fire unyielding. Kalen lowered his rifle, his hands trembling. He looked at Mara, at Rurk, at the squad. He saw the fire in their eyes, the defiance in their stance. He knew they had endured, they had killed, they had survived, but the void was vast, the hive endless, and humanity's last stand was far from over. Kalen's voice was low, a whisper of steel. We march. Mara's blade gleamed, her voice a storm. We endure. Rurk's growl was fire, his weapon heavy. We kill. The squad moved forward into the shadows, into the void, and the hive burned. Chapter 11, Ashes in the Dark, the tunnels breathed death. Every step the squad took was swallowed by the silence, broken only by the crunch of shattered stone beneath armored boots. The air was thick with dust and the acrid stench of burnt ichor clinging to their lungs, coating their tongues with bitterness. The hive's pulse had ceased, but the void beyond seemed to thrum with unseen menace, as though the silence itself was alive, waiting, watching. Kalen led, rifle raised, its barrel still warm from the slaughter. His visor flickered with ghostly light, HUD struggling to pierce the haze. He could feel the weight of the chamber behind them, the ruin, the corpses, the victory that tasted like ash. His mind replayed the collapse, the screams, the thunder of stone. He had survived, but survival was a hollow word here. In the void, survival was only a delay of death. Mara moved at his flank, blade drawn, its edge glistening with alien blood. Her movements were precise, predatory, yet her eyes betrayed the storm within. She had seen too much, cut too deep. Each kill carved into her soul, each strike a reminder of what they had lost. She whispered under her breath, words Kalen could not hear, prayers or curses, perhaps both. Rurk lumbered behind, heavy weapons slung across his chest, his armor scarred and dented. His breathing was ragged, a growl with every exhale. He was the squad's anchor, the brute force that held the line, but Kalen saw the cracks in him too, the tremor in his hands, the haunted stare when he thought no one was watching. Even iron breaks under enough strain. The squad pressed deeper into the hive's arteries. The walls were slick with residue, veins of alien matter pulsing faintly, though the heart had been shattered. Shadows stretched long, twisting into grotesque shapes. Every corner threatened ambush, every silence screamed of hidden predators. Their formation tightened, rifles sweeping, blades ready. They were ghosts in the dark, hunters and hunted alike. Kalen's voice cut through the silence, low and commanding, eyes sharp. The hive is wounded, not dead. It will bleed, but it will strike back. Mara's reply was steel. Then we carve deeper, we cut until nothing remains. Rurk spat, the sound echoing. Let them come, I'll tear their throats out myself. But beneath the bravado, Kalen felt the weight pressing on them all. The hive was endless, its tunnels stretching beyond comprehension. They had broken one chamber, one pulse, but the war was a leviathan, vast and unyielding. Humanity's last stand was not a battle, it was a war of attrition, a war they were losing. The tunnel widened into a cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. The ground was littered with husks, brittle shells of creatures long dead, their forms twisted and broken. The squad slowed, weapons raised, senses straining. The silence here was heavier, oppressive, as though the cavern itself held its breath. Kalen crouched, fingers brushing one of the husks. It crumbled at his touch, disintegrating into dust. He felt the fragility, the decay. The hive was ancient, older than humanity's reach into the stars. They were fighting something primordial, something that had endured eons. His chest tightened with the realization, what arrogance had driven humanity to believe they could stand against this. A sound broke the silence, a scrape, faint, distant. The squad froze, rifles snapping toward the source. Shadows shifted, forms moving at the edge of vision. Kalen's heart hammered, adrenaline surging. He raised his rifle, finger tightening on the trigger. The creatures emerged, crawling from fissures in the walls, their bodies glistening with ichor, smaller than the beasts they had faced before, but faster, more agile. Their eyes burned with alien fire, their movements precise, coordinated. Scouts, hunters, the hive was not dead, it was adapting. Contact, Kalen barked, voice sharp. Form line, hold the choke. The squad moved with drilled precision, forming a wall of steel and fire. Mara surged forward, blade flashing, cutting down the first creature with brutal grace. Rourke's weapon roared, tearing through the swarm, each shot a thunderclap in the cavern. Kalen fired in controlled bursts, every round finding its mark, every kill a necessity. The creatures struck with ferocity, darting, weaving their claws, scraping against armor, their shrieks piercing the air. The squad held, but the pressure mounted, the swarm pressing harder, faster. Kalen felt the strain, the weight of every second. His rifle's barrel glowed, his armor shook with impacts. He gritted his teeth, refusing to yield. Mara's voice was a storm cutting through the chaos. Push. Break them, she moved like a phantom blade, carving arcs of death, her movements fluid, relentless. Rourke bellowed, his weapon spitting fire, his fury a wall against the tide. Kalen pressed forward, every step a defiance, every shot a declaration. They fought not for victory, but for survival, for the chance to take one more breath, one more step. The swarm faltered. The cavern echoed with shrieks, bodies falling, ichor spraying. The squad pressed harder, their fire unyielding, their blades merciless. And then silence. The last creature fell, its body twitching before stillness claimed it. The cavern was a grave once more, littered with corpses, the air thick with death. Kalen lowered his rifle, chest heaving, sweat dripping beneath his armor. He looked at Mara, at Rourke, at the squad. Their faces were masks of exhaustion, their eyes burning with defiance. They had endured again, but Kalen felt the truth gnawing at him. The hive was endless. For every chamber they broke, for every swarm they slaughtered, more would rise. Humanity's last stand was not a war they could win. It was a war they could only fight until the void claimed them. He spoke, voice low, heavy with steel. We march, Mara's blade gleamed, her voice a storm. We endure. Rourke's growl was fire, his weapon heavy. We kill. The squad moved forward, deeper into the hive, deeper into the void. Their steps echoed in the silence, their fire unyielding, their defiance burning. They were humanity's last stand, shadows in the void, warriors against the endless dark. And as they marched, Kalen felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him. The hive would burn, humanity would fight, but in the shadows of the void he knew their stand was not for victory. It was for survival, for defiance, for the refusal to yield. The void swallowed them and the war raged on. Chapter 12. The abyss unleashed, the cavern narrowed into a throat of stone, jagged walls pressing inward, as if the hive itself sought to crush them. The squad's boots struck the ground with a rhythm that was both defiant and weary, each step echoing against the blackened rock. The air was thick, humid, alive with the stench of ichor and the faint metallic tang of blood. Their armor was scarred, their weapons hot from endless fire, but their eyes, Kalen's most of all, burned with the refusal to yield. Kalen raised his hand, halting the squad. The silence was oppressive, a weight that pressed against their ears. He crouched low, rifle angled, scanning the shadows that writhed at the edges of their light. His mind was a storm of calculation, every possibility clawing at him. The hive was endless, yes, but this chamber, this narrowing throat, felt different. It was not just another nest. It was a convergence, a place where the swarm gathered, where the abyss itself breathed. Mara's voice cut through the silence, sharp as her blade. Something waits ahead, I can feel it. Her knuckles whitened around the hilt of her weapon, the steel gleaming faintly in the dim light. Rourke shifted, his massive frame tense, his heavy weapon gripped like a lifeline. Then we carve it out, whatever it is. His growl was low, guttural, a promise of violence. Kalen's jaw tightened. He could feel it too, the pulse of something vast, something ancient. The hive was not merely alive, it was aware, and it was watching. They advanced. The tunnel widened into a chamber vast enough to swallow cities. The ceiling arched high above, lost in shadow, dripping with strands of organic matter that pulsed faintly, veins of bioluminescence crawling across the walls. The floor was slick, a carpet of flesh and stone fused together, twitching beneath their boots. The squad spread out, rifles raised, blades ready, eyes darting across the grotesque expanse. Then the sound came. A low, resonant hum, vibrating through the chamber, through their bones. It was not a sound meant for ears, it was a command, a summoning. The walls trembled, the floor quaked, and from the shadows poured the swarm. Hundreds, thousands, creatures erupted from fissures in the walls, from the ceiling, from the very ground beneath them. Their shrieks tore through the chamber, a cacophony of hunger and rage. Mandibles clashed, claws scraped, wings beat against the air. The squad tightened formation, backs to one another, weapons blazing. Hold the line, Kalen roared, his voice a thunderclap. His rifle spat fire, rounds tearing through carapace and flesh, ichor spraying in arcs across the chamber. Mara moved like a storm, her blade slicing through limbs, severing heads, her movements precise, merciless. She ducked beneath a claw, drove her weapon upward, splitting a creature from throat to skull. Her breath was ragged, her eyes wild, but her strikes never faltered. Rourke was a wall of fury, his heavy weapon roaring, each burst shredding swathes of the swarm. He bellowed curses, his voice raw, his body shaking with the recoil. When his weapon overheated, he swung it like a club, smashing skulls, breaking spines. The chamber became a slaughterhouse. The squad fought with desperation, with defiance, with the knowledge that this was not a battle they could win, but one they would fight until the void itself swallowed them. Kalen's mind raced even as his body moved with instinct. The swarm was endless, yes, but the hum, the resonance, it was not random. It was a signal, a command. Somewhere in this chamber there was a source, a heart, a core. Focus, fire, he shouted, pointing toward the far end of the chamber where the walls pulsed brighter, veins of light converging into a grotesque mass. There, that's the source. The squad shifted, carving a path through the swarm, their weapons blazing, their blades dripping. Every step forward was bought with blood, every inch of ground claimed through violence. The creatures pressed harder, shrieking, clawing, tearing, but the squad pressed harder still. Mara's blade cleaved through a beast that lunged at Kalen, her voice a snarl. "Move, damn you, don't stop." Rourke's roar shook the chamber as he hurled a creature aside, his weapon blazing into the pulsing mass ahead. "Die, you bastards, die." The mass writhed, a grotesque fusion of flesh and stone, veins glowing brighter as if feeding on the swarm's fury. It pulsed like a heart, each beat shaking the chamber, each tremor summoning more creatures. Kalen's eyes narrowed. He felt it, the abyss staring back at him, the hive's consciousness focused upon this place. This was not just a nest, it was the core, the nexus, the abyss unleashed. He raised his rifle, voice a storm. "We end it here." The squad unleashed everything. Rifles spat fire, blades tore flesh, grenades detonated, explosions ripping through the mass. The chamber shook, the swarm shrieked, the core writhed. Ichor sprayed, walls cracked, the hum faltered, but the core fought back. Tendrils lashed outward, striking the squad, hurling them across the chamber. Mara slammed into the ground, blood spraying from her mouth, but she rose, blade in hand, eyes burning. Rourke staggered, his armor cracked, his weapon sparking, but he roared, charging forward. Kalen felt the tendrils wrap around him, crushing, suffocating. His vision blurred, his breath faltered, but his mind was steel. He raised his blade, drove it into the tendril, severing it, ichor spraying across his armor. He staggered forward toward the core, every step a battle against the abyss. The squad converged, their weapons tearing into the mass, their blades carving deep. The core shrieked, a sound that split the chamber, that tore through their minds, that threatened to shatter their sanity. But they pressed harder. Kalen's voice was a roar, a command, a defiance. For humanity, for the last stand. Mara's blade plunged deep, Rourke's weapon detonated, Kalen's rifle spat fire, and the core ruptured. The chamber exploded in light, in sound, in fury. The swarm shrieked, convulsed, collapsed. The walls trembled, the ceiling cracked, the ground split. Ichor sprayed in torrents, the air filled with smoke and fire. And then silence. The core lay shattered, its veins dark, its hum silenced. The swarm lay broken, their bodies twitching before stillness claimed them. The chamber was a grave once more, littered with corpses, the air thick with death. Kalen staggered, chest heaving, armor drenched in ichor. He looked at Mara, at Rourke, at the squad. Their faces were masks of exhaustion, their eyes burning with defiance. They had endured, again, but Kalen felt the truth gnawing at him. The hive was endless. For every core they shattered, for every swarm they slaughtered, more would rise. Humanity's last stand was not a war they could win, it was a war they could only fight until the void claimed them. He spoke, voice low, heavy with steel. "We march." Mara's blade gleamed, her voice a storm. "We endure." Rourke's growl was fire, his weapon heavy. "We kill." The squad moved forward, deeper into the hive, deeper into the void. Their steps echoed in the silence, their fire unyielding, their defiance burning. They were humanity's last stand, shadows in the void, warriors against the endless dark. And as they marched, Kalen felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him. The hive would burn. Humanity would fight, but in the shadows of the void he knew their stand was not for victory. It was for survival, for defiance, for the refusal to yield. The void swallowed them, and the war raged on.